Welcome to this panel that we have today. It is called a volunteer panel, but I like to think of it as a panel of climate action figures. My name's Peter Toscano. I'm the host of Citizens Climate Radio, and along with Sarah Wanis, we are hosting this conversation with 4 climate action figures. These action figures, 3 of them are college students. One teaches as a school teacher. They come from 4 different parts of the United States and from very, very different backgrounds. In fact, if this was a panel on almost any other topic, chances are there could potentially be an argument, but they all agree about climate change. We're going to introduce you to them in a special way. We actually are so impressed with their works that we made short videos for each one. So we're going to show you a video of one of them, then I'll quick check in with that person, and we'll go through all 4 videos until we get to all of them, give them a chance to have a conversation and ask questions with each other, then give you a chance to ask questions. At any point, feel free to put your questions in the chat box. We have Karina and Kathy. They are monitoring that chat area, and they will be keeping track of questions so that we can get the ones that we could ask our panelists. So with that, I think we should just jump right into it. And Sarah, how about we play the first video of Sarah Ott?
I am an 8th grade physical science teacher. I'm also a National Center for Science Education Teacher Ambassador for Climate Change. And I'm also the Dalton Citizens Climate Lobby chapter leader. I got a lot going on. I really, really love the excitement level of middle schoolers. I try to take and harness their energy for good. We start by looking at very basic phenomena. Kids are capable of looking at a newspaper article and seeing, hey, why did Hurricane Harvey dump so much rain on Texas? And then we can do a lab in class with boiling water, and I can say, what are the molecules doing? What are they doing when we heat up our Earth? For the most part, my students are very interested in climate change, and I can tell that they're nervous about it. And if I start talking about it here in my classroom, then students see how it's done, and they're capable to do it themselves and maybe bring it up at home at the dinner table. In Northwest Georgia, it's very conservative, and people here have really big hearts, and they really care about their fellow man. They also really love the environment, and they love our natural world. We're in the perfect location to be at the forefront of this new day in energy. We have a brand new solar manufacturing plant here in Dalton. So passing our legislation is good for Northwest Georgia. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. My mom was a single mom. And so when I was given a gift, it was special. And that's how I teach my children with their things. I want you to take care of it. I see their beautiful faces, and they talk about what they want to be when they grow up, and they talk about where they want to live, and every opportunity that I had, I want for them. My modern life would not be possible without the technological revolutions that we've had in the past. So I am grateful for what fossil fuels have done for me. At the same time, I can recognize that after you do something for a while and it's starting to cause harm, that maybe it's time to transition to something new. I got in CCL and I had no idea what I was doing. CCL really has given me the tools and has empowered me and has educated me to be able to take the steps that I need to take to protect the world for my kids and my students. Today at school, we got news that the football scrimmage has been canceled because the heat index is too high. It's not safe, and having a few of these days every now and then is normal. What isn't to be expected is to have the number of these days continually increase. How many times are my students not going to be able to go outside? We're not talking about some distant future. I'm talking about kids that are going to be during my career. Will they be able to go outside? Climate change is hard to look at. I'm not interested in turning away from ugly things. I will look the ugly things in the eye and say, we can fix this.
Well, thank thank you, Sarah. We have a bunch of people watching on Facebook Live. We've got people here. Life has changed a lot for you since that video was made. Are you still teaching, and how is everything going?
I am still teaching. It is wild. I had to snap a few pictures while we were just watching that because I just miss my students and my classroom. It's good. Like I'm glad that my students are still checking in with me. But God, it was good to see their faces in that video. I miss them a lot.
So you're not doing remote teaching much with them
Oh,
at this
yes,
moment?
absolutely. But teaching online is totally different. It's a totally different ball game than, than teaching in person. I don't get those hugs. I don't get those silly eighth grade jokes, silly things that they say on a regular basis. And, they're turning in their assignments and they're being real good kids. I've got a real good bunch of kids, but it's not the same. I miss them. I miss hearing them.
I'll bet. I'll bet. And those earrings, are those something special? There's a lot going on there.
There is a lot going on here, guys. If you can only see my face, I'm going big. It's go big or go home right here.
Well, great. It is so wonderful to have you here. I'm really excited. Thank you so much for showing up.
Of course.
All right, Sarah, we're ready for our next climate action figure. Let's learn about Morgan.
Different high schools from around the country build solar cars and they come to Texas Motor Speedway to race them. I am a part of Covenant Christian Academy and we have 2 cars that we are racing. It's a lot of hard work, but I've always kind of had a heart for renewable energy and it's kind of shaped the way that I want to go about my career. Honestly, I didn't know a whole bunch going in. I mean, I'm very inexperienced in this field. I don't really have any formal training. Obviously, I'm in high school. But I have had such a huge opportunity and I've been able to learn a ton. My dad is an electrical engineer and he's been talking to me about the different things that he's been experiencing through work. My dad worked in the coal industry for almost 30 years. There's vastly more jobs in solar right now than there is in coal. It's possible to transition from one industry to another. I am a very, very strong Christian believer, and I believe wholeheartedly that God created the earth. I also am a huge lover of nature, and I really don't think that that has to be a contradiction. I've been just doing a lot of research, trying to find the most credible sources I could. Is this thing, global warming, separate from Christian beliefs? And I honestly say no. God gave mankind the role as caretaker. We're still called to take care of and maintain what God has created. I am very much a conservative and I'm very much a Christian, yet I think it's a huge problem. And I really believe that talking about it and trying to educate people and help them come to their own conclusions, I think that that's very, very important. It's hard to want to accept something, especially if your foundation and your opinion and what you've believed for so long is formed one way. It's hard for me to change my opinion too. But climate is changing if you sit there and think about the people affected. I mean, it may not be your family, but it's a lot of people's families. And it may not be the animals around you, but it's a lot of animals around somebody. And I'm called to maintain that creation. We need conversation. We need people to become aware. The more people we have talking about it, the more impact we have. Our new car, we were rushing. We designed a car that's never really been done before. It's folded aluminum. I'm nervous, but other than that, I'm good. I've never thought of myself as special, but I'm willing to help out in the places that I can. Nothing I've done is something other people can't do. And as far as being a part of CCL and the activism part, many high school kids are right here with me. Any help is big help. Any thought and good conversation is valuable. Learn to seek the truth. It's not always easy. It's not always fun. If you're nervous, just jump in. Just jump in and help, because I was nervous. But sometimes you're needed.
I love that at the end. Sometimes you're needed. For whatever reason, we have Sarah. We can't get rid of your beautiful face, which we don't want to. But Morgan, how are you? Are you there? Morgan, can you hear me? You might be muted. I know she's here. We saw her. There she is. Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Doing well. Now, since that was done, so much has changed in your life. You're no longer a high school student. You went away to college, and now you're back at home in college.
Yes.
So where did you go, and what's going on in your world?
That's a great question. Okay, so since that video, I graduated high school. That was actually filmed in the summer, but yes, I graduated high school. We finished the Solar Car Challenge and we placed second in our division. And then I started college at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. And I'm pursuing a degree in electrical engineering so that I can work in the power industry and hopefully focus on renewable energy. And then lastly, I've been working from home and doing school from home, obviously, for the last few weeks because of the coronavirus. But thankfully, school is still doable. Just like Sarah said, it's very, very different ball game from home, but it's very doable. And I'm very thankful that we've been blessed and my family is healthy as of currently. So that's just a little bit about how my life has changed.
Well, thanks. We're seeing wonderful things in the chat. People are loving these videos, and I just think it's a great way. I get chills. I've seen them so many times already, but every time I just kind of get a chill as I hear you and the others tell their stories. So thank you. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, of course.
All right, Sarah, we're ready for our next climate action figure, Jacob.
One of the first days I was interning on Capitol Hill, we were walking around the Capitol, kind of learning. And it was an amazing feeling to be like, I'm in the middle of all this right now. As long as I can remember, politics and current events has always been my interest. I've always kind of wanted to be here in DC. I think the Republican Party is sort of searching for itself now in terms of its identity. I'm actually optimistic about the future of the party just because I know so many young Republicans that care about climate change and they care about a ton of other issues that I think the country as a whole really cares about. I think addressing climate change is becoming universal among young people. Now, we do debate about policies that what it would take to address that, but I think that's a more fruitful discussion than debating the science. You know, I hear a lot just talking to older people. They like to say, you're too young to know what you're talking about, but at the same time, I'm like, look what we're living in. Like, this isn't how it's supposed to be. I think each generation sort of gets to define what politics is. That's why it's so key for people who I think are level-headed and want to have fruitful discussions to really get involved when they can, because they bring a lot of people with them. They create a culture in which we can talk about these things in a calm way, where you meet new people and they share new ideas. It really starts to mold you and you really sort of come to the best conclusions about how to address an issue. Basketball has been kind of a big part of my life. Being originally from Huntington Beach, California, I'm a huge Lakers fan. The mentality is applicable to any aspect of life, not necessarily just basketball. I had a lot of people around me that have always worked really hard, and I try to bring that to my own life, you know, working hard, whatever I'm doing. You know, growing up during the recession, you know, seeing how bad it was around the country, but personally, you know, it was a struggle for my family. My dad being in construction, probably the hardest hit industry. That really sort of, I guess, defined me. Seeing my dad have to work, you know, 17-hour days, going from his day job for 8 or 9 hours and working till 3 a.m. at night, really showed me what hard work is. I was working on a job with him, and I remember getting jobs at 7 a.m. and being there till 2 a.m., paying for gas with the change in your cup holder, because that's all you really have at the time. You really don't take it for granted anymore, how hard life can be. And I think it really makes you realize the importance of family and sticking together with the people around you, because they help you get through the roughest times. You know, we want to preserve nature for our families. Being outside is key to any child's development. I think it really brings people together in a way that nothing else can. I was born in Huntington Beach, California, moved to Concord, North Carolina when I was 7. It was a big shift coming from Southern California to the South. I joined Boy Scouts, and that really informed sort of my outdoors experience and camaraderie with people in the outdoors and really learning valuable lessons, learning a lot about myself. I think Republican or conservative values can go hand in hand with, you know, addressing climate change and conservation. I think historically the Republican Party has really had a good history of addressing the environment. It's the party that pushed for conservation, pushed for establishing national parks, pushed for environmental legislation. Young Republicans really want to address climate change. I think it's an overwhelming issue for them. We're really going to be the first generation that is deeply feeling the impacts of climate change, because it's going to start happening everywhere. These are big issues, important issues. You need to think about what's the best way to go. The energy of the young and the wisdom of the old can really come together and I think make a lot of change.
Thank you, Jacob. The first time we met was actually this semester before all of this happened, when you were in DC for CCL's very first Republican-only lobby day, where I was covering it for Citizens Climate Radio. Since that video, your life has changed and then changed again. So what have you been up to, and where are you at these days?
Sure. Well, thank you, Peterson, for hosting this. So my life's changed quite a bit. I'm in my last semester at Seton Hall University, so I graduate next month. So I'm really excited for that. I was spending this past semester up until about March in Washington, D.C. in their semester in D.C. program, but unfortunately had to cut that short and return home to Concord, North Carolina. But since that video has happened, I was actually able to attend the UN Youth Climate Summit. So about 150 youth from all over the world were able to go to the UN to discuss climate change. And then, like you mentioned, we had CCL had its first ever conservative lobby day, which I think was extremely successful and brought a lot of positivity because of how receptive a lot of the conservative offices were.
I'm excited because I was able to get so much audio of the various Republicans talking about what they bring to the climate conversation. That's a really exciting development, seeing that shift. So thank you for this work you're doing. And we're ready for our final video. In the final video, you're going to meet Alejandra. In the video, she is referred to as Emily, but most people call her Alejandra. And she is also, her life has also been displaced like other folks, and we'll learn about that in a moment. But let's see Alejandra's video.
You know, low-income neighborhoods are disproportionately affected by climate change. A lot of the community here do work in the field, especially the Latino community. The labor is intensive, you're in direct sun. I think because so much of the immigrant community in the Central Valley works in the fields, they see it every day and they see the changes. You know, over 70% of Latinos are not approached by environmental organizations. Education is always a really good way to make change, and I think that's definitely the case for just environmental awareness. I really needed an outlet where I felt like I was really making an impact and really contributing. And when I found CCL, it was exactly that. Being a millennial, you see so many things online about climate change, and you just want to do something. And CCL has really allowed me to do something productive. You know, I can actually say, you know, I do this, I'm doing my part. La Remate is a really big community hangout. Families just love to spend their weekends here and shop for fruit, you know, have some fun. I do think that immigration and climate change are connected. My grandpa moved here because of how dry it had gotten in Mexico. The crops are dying off. The weather isn't sustaining them like they used to, and so people come here. Growing up wanting to be politically involved, but being a little bit quiet about it, I was able to just observe the conversations, both on the conservative and liberal spectrum. You're trying to understand the other person, and compassion plays a part in that desire for communication and that desire to be understood. When I was 14, I started learning American Sign Language. I started it because both of my parents are severely hard of hearing. You know, it was just really interesting to see that communication be nonverbal. I've been playing the vihuela for 5 years. I love it. Mariachi, I think, overall made me find my identity as a Latina. I just graduated high school, and this upcoming year in September, I'll be starting my freshman year at Stanford. It's really exciting going off to a school like Stanford. I'm excited to go there and represent, you know, being a low-income, first-generation student of color. Something I'm really passionate about is education reform and how that affects different aspects of a lot of the problems we see today, like climate change. You don't have to do a huge project or a huge contribution to climate change. If I talk to somebody and they ask me, what do you do in your free time? Or what are some of your worries about the community? You know, I'll say climate change and I'll be vocal about it. Just having the conversation is so important. Just being comfortable saying, you know what, I'm a climate advocate.
Gracias, Alejandra. Gracias por tu video y para tu mensaje también. And thank you so much for joining us today. You went off to college to Stanford, but like most people, your life has been disrupted. What's going on in your world, and how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, I started my freshman year of college and it was cut short, but I'm happy to be home. I'm home in Fresno with my mom and my cats. So it's kind of nice just to lounge with them, and the schoolwork is a little bit difficult to handle online, but you know, this is the safest way for everybody. So I'm happy to be home.
I think cats have become the heroes of this corona containment. There's a lot of cat action going on.
Yeah. Yep.
So much. Well, thank you for being here. And to all the folks who have joined and are watching on Facebook and through Zoom and other platforms, thanks for being here. These panelists are very happy to take your questions. So we have Karina and Kathy who are monitoring the chat, and they will look at your questions. So feel free to put questions and comments there, and we'll definitely try to get them to the panelists. In a moment, the panelists are going to chat with each other, but first we have a poll question for you. And unlike with, there it is, there's our poll question. We're kind of curious about identity, and obviously many parts of your identity is important, but which of the following has had the biggest role in shaping your climate work? And you can choose it, and we're going to see where people, fall in with that, and we'll share those results as well with everyone and a little bit later. So answer that question: what part of your identity has been most important to you? And then you'll have a chance to fill out a poll for this session. But with that, Alejandra, I think you have a question for one of our panelists. We're going to give them, panelists, all a chance to ask each other a question. And I believe you have a question. Oh, Sarah, actually, it's Sarah, you're up first. Sorry, Alejandra, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Sarah, you have a question for Morgan.
Sure do. So as you guys know, I'm a teacher, and I'm very much interested in getting my students prepared for that next wave of cool new energy jobs. Like I mentioned in our video, we've got a brand new solar manufacturing plant right here in Dalton, and it's so exciting to have that here. So Morgan, what advice would you give to my students, they're 8th graders, about careers in science that would help address climate change?
That is a very lovely question. First of all, I would just say, definitely pursue whatever, if you want to have a career as maybe electrical engineering and then doing power, definitely feel free to pursue that and never be afraid. But also, I would just like to answer that with respect to maybe 3 things: education, personal choices, and personal advocacy. So since their generation will be the ones most impacted with the challenge of climate change, I would suggest developing a sound scientific understanding of the problem and the best solutions by just relying on credible sources such as Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, who we heard earlier, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, MIT Climate Interactive, just all of those things. Also, just help them think about personal choices. So maybe start adopting healthier choices in our own lives, such as selecting renewable energy to power our homes. So nearly all electric providers have this option as a choice now. And if not, then they could maybe consider adding rooftop solar to their houses and talk to their parents about that. Or I know they're in 8th grade now, but for the future, consider driving an electric car. Those have a lower environmental impact and are already cheaper to own and operate than gasoline cars. I would also say, for personal advocacy, sharing what you have already learned about the problem and solutions with others, because I know that you're teaching them just so much already. So I'd say with their friends. So for me, I wrote a senior thesis at my high school on the topic of caring for creation and what does that look like for climate care. So I gave this as an easy way to talk about it with my friends. And then for family, share what you've learned with your mom and your dad and your grandparents and your extended family. Don't be afraid to talk. And just lastly, policymakers. CCL provides an excellent way for us to connect. So with what we've learned in our area. So even as 7th and 8th graders, they can already participate in CCL.
Super answer. Thanks, Morgan. Now, Morgan, you have a question for Alejandra.
Yes, I do. Alejandra, I really identify with your point about how you don't have to do a huge project or make a huge contribution to climate change. You and I only recently graduated high school and became eligible to vote. Sometimes when you're so young, it feels like there's not much that you personally can actually contribute to the cause. It's not like you can physically make changes that improve legislation, because we're not policymakers, right? But what I've come to realize is, just like you said, it's so often that just engaging in intellectual conversations and exposing people to healthy dialogue around this issue does make a meaningful impact in changing hearts and minds, on an individual level. So my question is, can you give some examples of people that you've heard, people that you've had some healthy dialogue with about this topic, and how has it begun to change their hearts and minds?
Thank you for asking. Yeah, when you ask me that, the first thing I think about is my mom. I've really made an effort to try to include her in what I'm learning throughout my entire CCL journey, which I started when I was 16. But she's a very skeptical person. She's the type of person who, you say, I want to buy organic. She's like, how do you really know it's organic? You don't really know. I'm like, yes, Mom, we do know. So it's been really nice to kind of educate her about the conversations, and especially from her position, she only went to the third grade in Guatemala, so she kind of feels like she doesn't have a place in the conversation because of her lack of education. But that's not true. I mean, if she's worked in fields since for a really long time, and my uncle still works in the field, so it doesn't involve us, and even just as regular citizens, it involves us. So I hope that our conversations have taught her that she does have somewhere to speak on this, and as does everybody else.
Thanks, Alejandra. Thanks, Morgan. Now, Alejandra, you have a question for Jacob. And I have to say, watching your two videos, sort of side by side, in a way, you represent different parts of the world in many ways. And so I'm excited that you are all part of this discussion right now.
Absolutely, me too. So Jacob, I really appreciated a lot of the things that you said in your video. But something that really stuck out to me was how you mentioned how debating policies on how to handle climate change is much more fruitful than debating the science. So what advice do you have to somebody talking to somebody and then they realize that that person is trying to debate the science of climate change?
Sure. So this actually comes up a lot, but one of the things, especially in the context of what's going on now, is to realize that it's always good to have an insurance policy and be prepared for any massive crisis, such as we're seeing with the COVID crisis right now. So I would say to people, even if you think humans are only contributing a little bit or not at all, if there is a chance that we can do something to limit the effects of climate change, it's always good to have an insurance policy, because not addressing it could cost untold amount of dollars and human lives. So I think it's important to have a policy now to address it.
Excellent. And we have a few minutes left that you still can have a little more of a conversation with each other and sort of kind of connect. And I love how most of you started your comments with gratitude, which is something we learn in CCL. But let's just open up all of your mics, and why don't you chat with each other, and we'll just watch this happen.
I've got a question. So, like I mentioned in the chat, those of you guys are monitoring it, we've got a wonderful Latin community here in Dalton. It is a wonderful place. It's the reason I live here, is because of that community. I love teaching them, and I love being a part of their lives every day, being a part of their families. They love to adopt me like one of their own. So Alejandra, I want to know, what advice do you have for me reaching out to to our Latino community here in town, and what can I do better? I want to know what I can do better.
Well, something I would suggest is to really push bilingual information, like at CCL booths. That's what drew me to CCL in the first place. It was at not an Earth Day event, but an environmental event, and I was walking past and I saw that they were making an effort to put dense pamphlets in Spanish, and that takes a lot of work. And that really touched me, and how just the approach was really supportive of the community as a whole, and wanting to uplift the community and educate the community. And yeah, I think that's really one of the best things you can do, because language is so near and dear to Latino people's hearts.
Thank you.
Sarah, I actually had a question for you. What are your students doing to get involved with addressing climate change? Are they in CCL, or are they doing other things?
Oh my gosh, we do so many things all the time. So I'll try to keep the list to a manageable chunk. But because I'm a physical science teacher, I try to look at physical science through the lens of climate change. There's a lot that there's a lot of science there. So there's a lot I have to work with, connecting the topics that I need to discuss, for a regular 8th grade year with them. So we do a lot of that. But we've also participated in some coloring contests. We've had some coloring contests at the mall, which have been really fun. We painted a big parachute and sent it off to Washington, D.C. Trying to think what else we've done. We do a lot of litter cleanups, which isn't climate related. But yeah, and my students were of course involved with the video. They were so excited to be involved with that video. We've also participated in scientific research studies with professors at George Mason University to explore, students' habits and students' attitudes towards climate change. So my kids get a lot. It's not all at once, it's kind of little doses here and there. But yeah, I kind of talk about climate change all the time.
Well, I know this isn't really a question, but I'd like to say I really appreciate that, because I had a couple of different teachers that come to my mind that whenever I was in junior high and high school, they weren't really afraid to talk about it, because I know that sometimes schools might want to shy away from a certain topic, but I really appreciate just kind of having people, especially teachers in my life, who weren't afraid to speak very objectively and just very truthfully, and weren't afraid about it, didn't shy away from it. And I think you even said that in your video, don't shy away from it. It's okay. It'll be a little dirty and nitty and gritty and not necessarily fun to always look at, but I think that's really important. And I appreciate you taking the time to really ingrain that in children, even as young as junior high. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's really hard around here. There's a big, I don't know. It's just like this huge thing of silence, and nobody was talking about it. And I would go outside and really experience, some kind of dread on days when it was unusually warm and it shouldn't have been, the way that it was. And everybody's like, "Oh, it's a beautiful day." And I'm like, "It's February. This is not the way that it's supposed to be, guys." And after I started doing that, I didn't want to be a Debbie Downer. Yeah, I'm a very positive person in general. But people have started talking about it more. So yeah, I can't, I know Catherine Hayhoe says that all the time, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. And I think that's made a huge difference.
Yeah, definitely.
I fully agree on the talking about it. I love and appreciate conversations on every single level. Kind of like how Peterson was saying, all of us might disagree on on this if it were any other topic, but I just love having conversations and learning why people think the way they do. So with that, Morgan, I was going to ask you, how would you suggest approaching climate change when it comes up with maybe some religious or conservative families in a way that shows them what you say, they don't conflict. Believing in religion and being a conservative doesn't conflict with believing in climate change?
Well, definitely. That's a great question. And I definitely would experience that with both my friends and my family, more so in high school, just because we were tighter and knit, a close-knit group of kids. But I think if you're talking, because I don't want to assume for everyone, right? So I'd say if you come from a conservative background or a Christian background and you're talking with other Christians, so this doesn't apply to everybody necessarily, but I would definitely take your time and research and come up with talking points for yourself. So even my senior thesis that I did, it came from a Christian background and a conservative background and was talking to other Christians and conservatives mostly. So come up with talking points and find places of commonality where y'all can relate and agree on certain things, and kind of start your foundation of your conversation there. And then kind of maybe explore some, for Christians, I would say explore this verse and explore this verse. And what does it look like to be a caretaker of creation? What does that look like for Adam and Eve? And then what does that look like for us now in current day, right? Or if it's a conservative, I'd say just kind of focus on finding places of commonality and then explore from there. Because I think that already enables a foundation of trust and agreement and just a place where you all already agree with each other and you're happy rather than almost like attacking or just like, you should think this or you should think this, you know? So that's kind of where I would start is first of all, find your talking points, think through it yourself, but then have like a very heart to heart, like kind place of commonality conversation, and then just kind of help them think about things. Because I think that's really important is having people come to their own conclusions and not forcing them to think one thing, you know? So that's where I'd start.
Jacob, I have a question for you, and it's one that I asked you in DC earlier this year. What do Republicans bring to the table in the climate movement? What is it? Why do Republicans need to be there? What do you bring?
At least for me, at least for me being a fiscal conservative, it was the sort of for me wanting to find the most efficient solution to addressing climate change, but that doesn't also upend a lot of what America is already about. But I think we just, whether it's because the Republican Party is a lot more diverse than I think people think it is. I think people tend to put a lot of broad strokes on it. But we have, fiscal conservatives, some libertarians are involved, and you have more religious and value-based conservatives. So each group, I think, tends to bring a different approach. As Morgan was talking about with more religious conservatives, they bring their values, which I think is very important to this discussion, and taking care of the earth. But then, like with me personally, fiscal conservatives wanting to find the most efficient solution that helps the economy and doesn't hurt it.
Great point, yeah.
Great. Well, we're about to get to some questions from our viewers. They've been pounding out the questions, and in a moment, Sarah Wanis is going to come, and she is actually the wizard behind the world of Zoom here. She's been running everything from behind the scenes. Sarah, you have for us the results to our poll. Let's see what you all had to say. All right, so what has had the biggest role in shaping your climate work and message is your career and or education. That was the number one thing. Number two coming in is family. And a few people were none of the above. If you put in none of the above, feel free in the chat to share what it was, if there is anything in your background that has shaped your climate work that wasn't listed there. All right, so with that, Sarah Wanis, are you ready to ask our panel some questions?
Yes, I am. So all of you have such inspiring stories about how you came to climate activism and how you've made a difference in your own communities. So to again address the elephant in the room, some of our climate activism looks a little bit different now in the time of coronavirus. So we had some questions about how coronavirus has impacted your activism. And have you come up with new ways to interact and spread your message thanks to the necessity of the current situation?
I can answer this quickly. So for me, it was being a conservative outreach fellow for CCL. There's about 10 of us all over the country that reach out to Republicans. So this has definitely impacted how we do things. But one of my favorite examples actually isn't from me. It's from a gentleman named Adrian out in California. And he was hosting an event at Stanford with the Young Turning Point USA chapter, which is a conservative organization. And he actually did a Zoom event with them where he had their chapter himself and an economist from Stanford come in to talk about carbon pricing. And that allowed them to have an expert on the call where the students could ask the expert questions as well as with Adrian. And it was a really good conversation. So doing something like that, I think it'd be very beneficial. But also a lot of the fellows are writing op-eds or trying to get on podcasts or letters to the editors. I think all those are good ways of still trying to get our message out there.
All right, anyone else want to jump in on that one?
I'll say something quickly. For me, I've just kind of been lounging at home, trying to stay afloat in school. School is really confusing online, and I'm home. I don't really want to do anything. I just want to be with my family. But for me, I guess it's just kind of put a pause on everything in general. So, and I think a lot of my friends feel the same way too. We're just kind of patiently waiting and seeing how this all turns out.
Yeah, I would second what Alejandra said. Being a teacher, I'm right now, I'm a caretaker of my own family, but also my students. And I've just been really trying to reach out to them and make sure they're okay. Because in many cases, school is their support system. And I really want my students to feel supported in this time. So I'm really kind of doubling down and checking in with my people and trying to give them hugs and love from a distance over over the internet. So I've been really focusing on just connecting with my people as much as possible.
I mean, I definitely agree with that. I wasn't gonna say much because I feel like I haven't done much, but I think I very much second that. It has been kind of hard just being kind of stuck at home, quite frankly. You aren't around all the people that you're used to being around with. It's harder to have those conversations. But I would say one really positive thing for me, even though it's not a huge climate advocacy thing, it has been really important for me because I've been given the opportunity to go out and go on walks. And like my family owns a little bit of land. And so just like go out there and just feed the cows and just like see all the green. And I don't know, it's been very refreshing and rejuvenating. I mean, school is hard. School's harder online sometimes because you might be given more assignments or stuff is confusing. And I'm sure the same thing is true for work. So I definitely understand that, but it's been giving me a great opportunity to go on walks and just kind of find my place in nature again. And that for me has been really nice. Just it's been a great reminder.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I have another question for everyone on the panel. Similar to the question that we asked in the poll to all of our participants, what life experience or worldview of yours has been the overriding factor causing you to become a climate change activist?
Well, I wasn't gonna start because I just finished talking, but I'll start, I guess, because I do have an answer. I would say for me, it's actually kind of been a combination of a few things. For me, I've been pretty vocal about this, but faith and religion have been very important to me. I am a Christian, and I don't see Christianity as being contradictory at all to climate change and climate activism and stuff about that. So for me, that has actually been quite a leading thing. So there's one, but also family. I know I mentioned my dad a little bit in the video, but he is also an electrical engineer. He did work in the in power industry, right? But he worked like coal and natural gas and oil company for a long time, and now he's doing solar development. So for me, that has just seeing him transition from one to the other. I've been just kind of watching and learning, and I feel like, I mean, he's my dad, right? So he's immediate family, and he's just had a huge impact on just my learning and my passion. Because I mean, I was young and impressionable, right? I'm in junior high, I'm in high school, and I'm only recently starting college, right? So I think I'm still formulating my opinions and my beliefs. And so for him to go through that kind of transition job wise at such a time whenever I was thinking about those things, that to me has had a lot of just impact on my beliefs around climate change. So yeah.
Yeah, I would second what Morgan said there. My family has been instrumental in getting me to this place. I am a granddaughter of coal miners. My grandmother was married to two coal miners. Both of them died before I was ever born. And so the importance that coal and fossil fuels has had on my life, and specifically touched my family, has been very tangible my entire life. But at the same time, it's also taken a lot from us too. You know, there are family members that I've never met, that I never had the opportunity to meet because of their job, because of working in the coal mine. So my family was always very encouraging when I just kind of popped out this way, you know, loving nature and loving the environment and always wanting to be outside and take care of animals. And my mom was very much a nurturer of that attitude. And I think a lot of that springs from our family history. We have a beautiful new world that we can build together. And I like the idea of being, you know, a descendant of coal miners who's helping my students, my own children, build a new, different world where we can all be healthy together. And we're kind of, you know, getting a glimpse of what that would be like a little bit, you know, with this coronavirus. This is not the way that any of us wanted this to happen. But I think a lot of people are kind of looking outside and going, you know, there's a lot of beauty outside my window. And it would be nice to capture this moment. And you know, even though this moment is really difficult and, you know, I wake up sad most days, I'm really glad that I can look out the window and see, you know, a beautiful sky right now. My air is kind of clean. I want to get to this place in a way that is economically sustainable and also, you know, sustainable for our environment. So we need to find a good way of doing this. But I'm hopeful that we can find, you know, a glimmer of hope in this really, really sad and difficult time.
I can jump in real quick. So I guess for me, the two, I guess, categories that really have influenced me would be family, like I talked about in the video with my father, and growing up to the recession, that really impacted me as a fiscal conservative. But also, at least politically for me, that was the other big one, was noticing that my party wasn't doing it really anything to address climate change, wasn't at the table discussing policies, but rather just denying it, which I think is never a good position to be in, because then you can't influence the policies that come about to address it. So those are kind of the two biggest things for me.
For me, the biggest things are definitely like family and, you know, my background, like my ethnicity and everything. I lost my dad in 2016 when I was 16 years old. Um, and that really instigated me to want to make a difference and want to just kind of get out there and be more productive with my time. You know, I had a life that he didn't have anymore, so I wanted to make the most out of it and make him, you know, proud, essentially. And I feel like one of the ways I can do that is to proudly represent my culture and my community, and to be an advocate for us.
Thank you all so much for sharing about that. We've got one last question for all of the panelists from the chat. I do want to remind everyone in the chat that thank you for all of the great questions that were asked in there. And if you want to continue this conversation with other CCL volunteers after, we do have the forums available on community for you to continue these conversations. But the last question that we have time for today, to send us off with these panelists, are what topics do you bring up when you're painting a positive picture of what the world could look like after we successfully address climate change?
In my area, because we have our new solar manufacturing plant and I teach kids, I try to talk about, you know, how clean, renewable energy jobs, there are much more of them than traditional fossil fuel jobs. Last I checked, it was like 3 or 4 for every one fossil fuel job. So I'm encouraging my students to kind of see like, hey, you can be a part of building this new world that we're working on together. And we have these opportunities right here in Dalton, Georgia. And we've got wonderful universities in our state of Georgia. And I'm really encouraging my students to really consider science careers, and specifically careers in energy, so that they can be a part of, you know, building this new future. And for me, again, you know, that reminds me of my grandfather. My grandfather helped build the world that we have now. And in my own way, I'm hoping to build the future that my students have via their education.
I fully agree. When I think about what it looks like in the future, I think it needs to be centered around education primarily. I think education has a potential to be such a powerful structure and is such a powerful structure that it could help a lot with climate change. So I see that climate education being one of the main things.
I would definitely second or third that. I would agree with both of you guys. Just I find often that it's not that people just don't agree at all. It's often that people just haven't really taken the time to think through all of the consequences of climate change, or just haven't really thought about it. Um, so I would just definitely encourage people, because that's just been a huge thing for me, is talk about it with your friends, talk about it with your family, help people become aware. And often I think ultimately they need to come to their own conclusions, right? You can't force them to think what you think, you can't force them to agree. Um, but I think often just awareness and education is just so important, and it helps have the topic become something that is conversed about, and it's not something that people shy away from. Because I think so, I mean, maybe less so now, but people definitely used to be like, oh, climate change, oh, you shouldn't say that. You know, don't talk about climate change. That's a very controversial thing. We don't want to talk about that. But just help them learn about either like exploring science, if that's something that you think would persuade them, or maybe for religious people, talk through like the verses with them, see what the Bible says. Or for conservatives, talk about like, I know Jacob already talked about it, but just like talk about how do conservative beliefs line up with that, or even like, you know, for anybody, just talk about it. And I think that helps so much.
And I guess I'll close out, and I'll agree with all the points that were just made, all great points. But for me, I think when I'm trying to paint like the end goal of this, I think it's an America that's leading the world in clean technologies and pushing the rest of the world into the future. American leadership, which is beneficial to the U.S. economy, because we want to be developing those technologies that ultimately lead to solving climate change. So I think it's something along those lines.
I am so glad that this question was asked, because this is where climate communication is moving. For so long, we've talked about the impacts of climate change and felt overwhelmed by them. But we need to start figuring out, how do we talk about the impacts of our solutions? Because that's what gets people really excited. And what's, there's horrible things that are happening with coronavirus, and people who are watching this, I'm sure everyone has been hit one way or another, and there's a lot of pain. But the one thing that people are seeing is, what does a world look like with less fossil fuel in it? And we're seeing, a brief moment of it. It's a horrible way to see it, but being able to use our creativity to paint that picture of what this new world will look like. Sean Digg, who's with Citizens Climate Lobby, he was on the Citizens Climate Radio show a couple of episodes ago, and he actually leads people through this thought experiment. Like, imagine this world when there's no longer fossil fuels being used. What will it look like? What will it smell like? What will it sound like? Envisioning that and communicating that will change. That's a game changer in our conversations about climate change. I'm so grateful for this panel. When I asked, like, what was in the poll, people who didn't see their identity listed, what was it that motivates them? For many people, it was love of nature, being someone who really cares and loves about nature. And it's funny that I put together those poll questions, and it's no surprise I didn't think of that. Not that I don't like nature, I really do, but I've never really been a traditional environmentalist. Like, some people on the panel, I don't come from a traditional background in climate. I mean, to me, Gay Pride Day is the most important day, not Earth Day. And when I was asked to lead this, to facilitate this panel, I said, you don't want me, because I don't really like Earth Day and I don't like panels. I'm like, not your guy. But I'm really glad I did, because this was been such a rich conversation. And it couldn't have happened without a lot of help. Sarah Wanis, who's been doing all of the organizing and the background here to this Zoom, Allison Cabisco, who brought the panel together. We've got Karina Ramirez, who has been helping with the questions in the chat, who also leads our diversity area and CCL Latino, where there's a great part of our website that's all in Spanish. Kathy Orlisco, who has also been helping out with the chat, Ricky Bradley, so many people. And of course, very special thanks to our panelists, Jacob, Alejandra, Morgan, Sarah. We've got 5 minutes left. Are there any closing statements, comments, inspiring words you want to share? Or I'm a Quaker, so we could just sit for the last 5 minutes in silence, and that works for me as well. I've been actually doing Quaker Zoom meetings. It's so weird.
Oh, that would be so weird. You guys just stare at each other.
We just do.
Well, I would just like to remind everybody, hey guys, we're all in this together. Reach out to the people that you love, remind them that they are loved, that you love them, and that we will get through this. We will get through this one step at a time, just like climate change. Climate change, we're going to get through climate change one step at a time. We're going to get through this one step at a time. So I love you guys. CCL is a lifeline for me. Y'all take care.
I'll just jump in and say quickly, your work is making a difference. I can tell from this last conservative lobby day that a lot of Republican offices are now talking about policy, not science. I didn't really have the science of climate change come up at all at any of my meetings. It was all about policy, the best way to address it. So all of your work is making a difference.
I would say have patience, especially in this trying time, and in general, for any other thing you approach, patience is definitely a virtue.
Yeah, I would agree with all of those things. Just have patience. Yes, that's a great point. And continue the conversation, but also always know that whatever you do, it helps. You are very valuable. You're very needed. Everyone is needed in this topic. So whatever you bring to the table, it's all great and it's all very, very helpful. So I'd encourage everyone.
Thank you all. That was a beautiful way to end. And thank you for all the people in watching. You are each climate action figures, and so much of your work is not seen, right? You're not, it's goes behind closed doors. You're writing letters and you're submitting letters to the editor. You're learning, but that is such critical work. And as been said by Morgan and others, talking about climate change is significant climate action. And so even though you are sequestered at home, you've got the social media, you can share these encouraging stories. And if you want to see connections with coronavirus and climate change, there are articles out there for sure. Our last episode was all about policy and climate change and coronavirus. We had policy experts on and public health experts. Our most current episode, which just dropped yesterday, is all about grief, eco-grief in a time of coronavirus mourning, which a lot of us have been experiencing. So there's some great resources you can use for yourself and share with others. So a big thank you to everyone. My Zoom background is falling apart behind me. It's an image from the last CCL conference. So I feel like I'm falling into the ether. But thank you all so much, and look forward to connecting with you all out there in the internet. And thanks again, panelists. You were just really awesome.